Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Al-Azouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we'll talk about SaMD, so software as a medical device. We talked about that in some of the episodes, but today we'll make a small comparison between Europe and US, and we'll talk about many details about software as medical devices just to help you to understand, because I still get a lot of questions about software classification. Is my software a medical device, etc., etc. So, and for that, I have with me Vivek Thakkar, which is an expert on software as medical devices. So, Vivek, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Hey, thank you, Munir. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and look forward to having this chat with you.
Great. So really, thank you. So we met together and you talked to me about what you are doing. And I said, oh, I need really to have you on my podcast to help me to make understand of what is an SaMD or how it is working. But before to start, can you tell us more about you, who you are, what you are doing, so that we can have a better understanding?
Sure. So my background is, I'm an engineer by background. I completed my bachelor's and master's degree in biomedical engineering. And as a part of my master's program, I was focusing on regulatory affairs for medical devices. So I've been in the device industry for last 12 years. I've worked with multiple device manufacturers, and I'm primarily focused on, I was primarily focused on class 2, class 3 interventional cardiovascular devices. But since last few years, I am involved in these machine learning algorithms, which are used in drug development or in clinical practice, and they are commonly known as software as medical devices. So that has been my journey so far, and I look forward to talk more about software as medical devices.
Yeah. So we know now that medical devices, if I can say, are growing with those softwares, because there are a lot more companies that are releasing softwares as medical devices. So which makes it like a topic of focus now, how we can have this software on the market, how we can put it, how the authorities can approve it, etc. So these are a lot of things that people are asking. Can you help us do this and that? Because we have a lot of companies that are developing software, but not having in mind, if I can say, the medical device regulation or whatever. They are really good in coding, in developing, but when we are asking them, oh, have you done this test? Have you done that thing? Have you done? They say, oh, what are you talking about? So this is the kind of thing that I'm hearing a lot. So I hope, with this episode, we can clarify some of the things that maybe are happening in Europe, in US, and you will focus on that, but it's happening also all over the world. So Vivek, can we start first, maybe just as a first introduction for the topic, on the basis, what is a software as a medical device? Because we have always the question, can a software that is used just in a hospital be a software as medical device? What is this software that we are talking about?
That's true. No, and that's pretty important to understand, because as you mentioned, right, there are so many companies that are developing these softwares, and you see these big companies who have really good software infrastructure. They are entering into healthcare, and which is a very highly regulated space. So it's very critical for these companies to understand what are medical devices and how to navigate this regulatory framework and get the device cleared by FDA or by EU notified bodies, and have them on market. So I think it starts with a very basic understanding of medical devices. And before I move forward, I just wanted to have this disclaimer that this discussion that we are having on software as medical devices, it's just like it's more for educational purpose. It doesn't constitute any kind of advice or services. And the discussion we are having, my views and opinions which I'm expressing, are just my personal, and it doesn't necessarily reflect any kind of organization or educational institution that I'm associated with. Yeah. So just wanted to have that there. It's no regulatory. Problem. You can't help it.
No problem.
So yeah, going back to medical devices, let's focus on medical device first, and then we add software on top of it. So what is a medical device, right? I mean, there is a definition which is laid out by FDA. They have it as a part of the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. There is a definition in EU. There is a definition for International Medical Device Forum, IMDRF. So there are these multiple definitions of medical device, but just to put it in a very simple language, what makes a tool or a product or a software a medical device. So this depends on, let's say you are manufacturing a tool or a product, and you are claiming that your tool can do a certain task. So I think that's the most important thing. The claim, the intended use of your device, that kind of defines whether you are a medical device or not. So the questions that you need to ask yourself as a company, as a device manufacturer, is your device diagnosing any disease? Is your device used in treatment of some disease, or curing, or preventing, or mitigating it, or just simply monitoring patients? And if your product has a medical purpose, then it's a medical device. So it's pretty straightforward. If your device is diagnosing, treating, curing, preventing, or mitigating, you have a medical device. Sometimes the answers to these questions are pretty easy, and you straightforward know whether you are a medical device or not. But sometimes, it's a little bit difficult to understand, and you are operating in the gray zone. So that's where I would say, ask for help for some regulatory people, and make sure that you consult with them in order to understand whether you have a medical device on your hand or not. So once, I think, that's the process of understanding if you have a device. But once you have a medical device, once you have a medical purpose, the next step of as a manufacturer is for you to understand what's the classification of your device, how risky is your device, right? I mean, let's say, for example, there's a toothbrush manufacturing company, and they ask all these questions to themselves, whether they are diagnosing, whether they are treating, or curing, preventing. I mean, of course, a toothbrush is not going to diagnose any disease. It's not going to treat any disease. But if you look at the last question, whether it is preventing anything, so if the toothbrush is kind of cleaning your mouth, and it's preventing from any kind of cavity or oral disease, so by the definition, it has to be a medical device, right? As a matter of fact,
this is really the good example that you said. Just for one thing, for the difference between Europe and US for this kind of products, because I suppose in the US it is a medical device, but in Europe it is not. So it's, I think, as we said, the definitions are also creating some kind of differences here.
Exactly. I was just gonna go there, that in FDA, toothbrush is a medical device. It's a class 1 least risk medical device, and in Europe it's a different classification, but it is still considered a medical device. So I guess only understanding whether you have a device or not is not enough. You need to classify your device based on the risk that your device will possess once you start using it as per the intended use. So what FDA and what European notified bodies, they have done is they have created a risk-based classification system. And it's not just them, so these are the two big examples that we have, but there are other harmonized standards which are internationally accepted. For example, the IEC 62304, which is a product life cycle standard, software lifecycle standard. And it also kind of classifies the devices based on the safety, based on the injury a software failure can cause. And that classification is ABC. So, in US, you have class 1, 2, 3. You have in Europe, class 1, 2A, 2B. N3, and you have the IC62304 ABC, and there is also a level of concern which is minor, moderate, or major. So there are these frameworks which are developed in order to make sure that the device that you have on your hand, it's classified appropriately as per the risk it's going to generate once it is used as intended.
Exactly. So we have also one confusion that is happening when we are talking about software for medical devices. We have the software that we call standalone, and we have the software that we have embedded inside an equipment, like electromedical equipment, software like a surgical robot or those dialysis equipment, etc. So is it the same, or should we separate them and say this one is a SaMD, this one is not? Or is there really a comparison or differences that we can define here or show here?
Sure. No, that's a great question, Munir. So software comes in different forms in healthcare, right? We have been using software in healthcare since a very long time. There are electronic health records, the software that you mentioned that controls the medical device. There's a software that controls the insulin pump, the pacemakers, so these softwares are embedded inside the medical device. And what they do is they help the hardware device, to achieve the intended purpose. So that is not considered a software as medical device. When we say SaMD, that means it is a standalone software that's that has a medical purpose. It's not within a hardware, or it is not helping a hardware to achieve its purpose. It is achieving that purpose by itself. So that that is the difference. And this is, by definition, it's called software as medical device. However, once you have the software inside a medical device, you call it software in medical device, which is SIMD. Okay. So that's a very that's a huge distinction, because in the case of SIMD, you are still submitting a software related documents to the agency, but it's not the primary mode of action, the primary mode of fulfilling the intended use.
No, I think it's great, because we have multiple types of software, and we have really to inform that SaMD is a specific type, which is standalone. So can we, in terms of software, we said at the beginning that there are definitions that people have to follow. Do you think if I can say, if we have a software as a medical device in the US, it can maybe not be a software as a medical device in Europe or in China or in Brazil? So do we have kind of something that is really harmonized for us to say, I have a software as a medical device, but so I can go to any region and I can submit it as a software as a medical device for the other region? Or no, there are really some restrictions in some other regions?
Yeah, so as a manufacturer, first thing that you need to understand is, where do you want to sell your product, right? And where is the need for your product? If you are targeting a specific disease area, or you are targeting a specific patient population, and that is specific to one region, that's the region where you want to launch your device. And whichever region you are launching your device, I think you need to follow the regulatory requirements and definition of that region. But these days companies are global, and they want to launch in all the geographies. So there is a possibility that a medical device in one region with a certain classification, maybe in a different classification, or maybe not even a medical device in some region. So there are harmonized definition, but then on top of it, there are some regional regulations also that define the classification of medical devices.
I think it's a good point, because we have also some people that say, oh, my product is registered in the US, so then I can register it in Europe. It's fine because US is highly regulated, etc. But as you said, each region has its own regulation. So you have again to start from zero and to go again to the regulation for the region, go again for a classification that maybe can be different, go again for some maybe additional tests because the region asks that, etc., etc. So it's not like it's approved in one region and it can go in every region out of the in the world. So I think it's a good point.
That's correct. And what we do as a regulatory function, I think it's our job to make sure that the device manufacturer understands what are the regulatory requirements in each region, and what are going to be the differences, and what is it going to take to get your device in a particular country. So I think that roadmap is something that needs to be developed pretty early on in the development life cycle, so that you have a clear understanding of where you are going.
So when we talked about classification, so you mentioned that classification for Europe, for example, is 1, 2, A to B3, for US 1, 2, 3, and there is also another level of classification which is more about the standard, which is the IEC 62304, so ABC. So is there any correlation between those classifications? Like if my product is class 3, then the IEC 62304 will be the highest class, or if my product is class 1, then the IEC 62304 will be the lowest class, or it's completely decorrelated. It has two different indicators.
So there are some overlaps, but each classification, as I mentioned earlier, each classification is based on the risk that your device is going to generate. So, for example, in the FDA, class 1, 2, 3 is in the increasing order of risk. I mean, class 1 being the least risky, class 3 being life-sustaining and the highest risk product. In the IEC 62304, the classification is based on the injury the software failure can cause. So that is ABC, depending on what kind of injury. In a medical device classification, it's based on the intended use and the disease that whether the disease is critical, non-critical, and whether the device is just diagnosing, treating, or monitoring. Or so there are various metrics which are being used in order to classify a device, and I would recommend anyone going through this process is to just have a focused understanding of one region and then go to the next region, rather than generalizing each of them and just assuming that since you are class 3 in the US, you will be highest classification in Europe too. It may not be true. So each there is no one size fits all approach, and that's why we have different definitions. But it's very important to understand that not one class is going to be same across the board.
And we have maybe to add to that the classification that we provide to the devices is not just to classify, just not to say it's a class 3, it's that. No, behind that, there is a process. For example, when you are class 3 in Europe, it's the highest class. But what does it mean? It means that you will go through a certain process for reaching the market. And I think for IEC 62304, because I worked also on that, when you classify it as class A, you will have to have some documentation, but if you class it as class C, there are additional documentation that needs to be provided, because higher is the class, higher are the requirements. So this is really the objective of the classification. It's not to just say it's a class 3 or class C or class A, etc. No, it's really objective there. Behind that, the objective is to provide more requirements, more documentation, or more things to prove that your software is safe on the market.
Exactly. And yes, this is the starting point. This is not where, this is not just the thing that you do. So having your intended use first, having your classification second, these two things kind of give you a identification to your device. For example, it says it is a class 2 device, or it says class 2B device. So that regulatory identification is the beginning of building the evidence package to be submitted to a regulatory agency to show the safety and effectiveness of your device. So this is the beginning. This defines what you are going to validate. This defines what's your analytical clinical validation is going to be. This defines what your acceptance criteria is going to be, and everything, all the results that you have will be tied up to the intended use and classification of your device. So by no means this is just an assignment of a number or a letter. It defines the total product evidence that will be generated by a sponsor.
Exactly. One of the other topic that a lot of people are asking is about SaMD validation. So as we are validating medical devices, we have some process of verification validation. The question mainly is how to validate a software because the software by itself is not touching the patient. It's a software, it's a certain thing. So it's just receiving some inputs and it's providing some outputs. So how to validate that. So in terms of validation, we have multiple types of validation. We have the clinical validation, we have the human factor, we have the cybersecurity, we have all those things. So do you have a certain methodology for validation or is there a certain point where you say, oh, if we want to validate, first we do this and second we do that, etc. So do you have something that you can provide maybe to help the audience?
Sure. So yeah, validation is something very important in terms of generating evidence for your device. And as I said, the intended use guides your validation criteria. So when it comes to making sure that you have enough evidence supporting your device, you need to go through a process of validating it. So it typically includes analytical validation, which means that if your device is giving a specific set of output for a specific set of input based on your device specification and based on your intended use, that means you have analytically validated your product. Your output meets the input. That's the criteria for analytical validation. When you talk about clinical validation, that's where you say that okay, how is this device going to work in the clinical setting, in the clinical workflow? Is it going to generate output that is clinically meaningful, or is it just going to generate something which is not going to be used anywhere? So that's something what we evaluate in clinical validation. Now, once you have an output, it doesn't. It has to have some clinical purpose to it. Like if you are making your software to say that you are going to detect tumor, you are going to detect tumors for breast cancer, is your software segmenting your images that it is supposed to in order to identify the tumor? But so if it is doing the image segmentation, that means it is analytically validated. However, the output that you are getting, is it clinically meaningful to come to a diagnosis of breast cancer? If that's yes, then you have a valid clinical association between your output and the disease that you are targeting. And then you make sure that the device that you are using, it's when it is used as per the intended use, it's used in an intuitive manner. The user interface of your device shouldn't be complicated, which can confuse the user and result in misinterpretation of the output and thus increasing the risk of the device. So that's where you do human factor testing, and that's where you do deployment testing to make sure that your software is not interrupting the clinical workflow, or maybe it is enhancing the clinical workflow, maybe it is making things faster, more accurate. So those are the kind of testing that you would do in order to make sure that your device is validated. Now, traditionally in the hardware space, all these validations, verifications, they have installation qualification, operational qualification, performance qualification, right? So those are all for hardware. The agency, the FDA and the EU and all the other international agencies, they are trying to make a framework that can work, that can be applicable to software validation. And there are a lot of guidance document that FDA and the other agencies have out there. But it's following the same principle that you are demonstrating that your device is safe and effective, and it's working as it was intended for. So that's the whole principle. No matter hardware or software, that's a kind of validation you need to generate. Now, on top of all these, since it is software and since it is dealing with all the data which is transferred across the cloud and across different systems, there is an additional requirement of cybersecurity. The patient data is confidential, the treatment data is confidential. So you also have to show that your software is not vulnerable to any kind of cybersecurity threats, and thus just revealing all that information. So that's something that is not in the hardware space. Of course, if there are software in the hardware, you can do cybersecurity testing, but this is pretty important when it comes to software as medical devices. And FDA has recently also released a guidance document on cybersecurity, which means they are taking it very seriously.
So in terms of all those testing that we are talking about, so clinical, human factor, etc., can it be done by the company itself, or should there be some kind of independent company that are doing all those testing?
Yeah, so it depends. If you are a startup company and you're getting this software from a vendor, and these softwares, it's not just one software. There are lot of parts, a lot of moving parts that work together. And if you have a vendor who is supplying you a particular piece of software, then you can rely on the validation data that they provide, based on you're working with the contractor.
Yeah.
But I guess it's okay to do it outside, as long as you are meeting your specification, you are making sure that you are giving the intended use to the outside vendor. It's not something that is unusual.
Exactly. I mean, you have, I mean, as you say, you compare the small companies that maybe not have the right people inside, and with big companies that have maybe the right people within their team. They hire the right specialists that can do all those tests. But yeah, even inside a big company, independency of people for testing is important. That the one that has created the software is not the one that is validating the software, because then it makes no sense. I mean, if I'm creating something and I validate it myself, say, yeah, I'm good, I'm the best, and everything is okay. So there is no error at all. So I think it's important to be sure.
And I guess one important piece that I guess I missed mentioning earlier is the quality system, quality management system, right? I mean, that's something that is needed for you to make a medical device. And there are ISO standards, there are ISO 13485. FDA has their quality management system, and these quality management system will allow or will make sure that you are manufacturing your device under design control, and you have all the evidence that is required to show that you are following design control, and you have a design history file where you have the history of all the design changes that you have made, and there are a lot of procedures and documents that you need to generate in order to establish the quality of your medical device. So that will kind of force you to go through these processes, even though if you are doing it with an outside vendor or if you are doing it in-house.
Okay. Now I think it's important that you are looking at regulations, at standards, at the right experts to help you and to make, if I can say, all this process working correctly. So Vivek, I think we covered most of the things that we want to talk about SaMD worldwide, or mainly the general overview of it. So is there any last point or last advice that you want to maybe give to people that are working in the SaMD business?
I based on the questions that I get in relation to software as medical device, people always start with the testing, and they're like, oh, well, what evidence do I need? What's my benchmark, and what do I need to what I need to test, and what are my specifications? So all these questions are related to testing. So my only recommendation to companies with these questions is to first go back and develop your intended use statement, and invest time and energy in doing that. Just have like all the functional team in one room, and have a workshop, and have something concrete developed before you begin any other development. Because what will happen is, whenever you have such questions regarding your testing, you can look at your intended use statement, and you can say that, okay, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I need to align to. So sometimes, when you don't have that central point, you don't have that central intended use statement, it becomes very confusing for the team. It becomes very confusing for everyone to kind of manage what's the development process going to be like. So my only advice to these companies is to focus on intended use statement, and then all your other requirements, everything will just kind of fall off from that intended use statement.
I think it's clear, and I think it's not only for software; it's also for other products. But yeah, having Correct. First the scope of what we want to do is really, I think, an important piece here. Okay, Vivek, really thank you for all the advices or all the explanation of what is an SaMD and how it is working and how people should take that, if I can say, because yeah, it's a big topic. So from which side should we take that? So I think it was really clear. So where people can follow up with you then, if they have maybe some question or want maybe to get continue the discussion with you about SaMD.
Sure. Yeah. I think the things that we talked about today, I think each of those topics can be like an hour-long discussion in itself. So I kind of briefly touched upon a lot of things, but if there is any specific question that anyone has on any topics that we discussed, just feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and ask any questions, and I'll be happy to provide you any answer. If I don't have an answer, I'll make sure that I guide you to the right resource to get the right answer.
Yeah, and I hope, if they come and ask you questions, so let's come back to maybe do another podcast episode, and then try to explain that to everybody then.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll be happy to do that. If there is any particular topic that has a lot of question, let's do that.
Right. So really thank you, Vivek, for your help. And as I said, I will put everything on the show notes. So don't hesitate if you are listening to that. So don't hesitate to go to the show notes and maybe connect with Vivek. Just maybe follow him also on LinkedIn, so that you can also have somebody that is really knowledgeable on SaMD if you have some question and you need some help. Okay, Vivek, it was really a pleasure to have you, and I hope for maybe having you in another episode. But for now, I think we are over with SaMD, and let's see if there are some questions for you. Okay, Vivek, So thank you, and I wish you a nice day.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.